East Lothian is shaped by quiet villages, ruined castles, and open countryside. Beneath this calm, older stories linger. Here are 8 haunted places where history feels close. Yester Castle. Standing above a bend in the River Tyne, near East Lothian, the ruins of Yester Castle rise quietly from the surrounding woodland. Built in the 13th century, the castle once served as a stronghold of power and protection. Today, its broken walls and roofless chambers suggest abandonment, yet local tradition insists that Yester Castle has never been entirely empty. One of the most disturbing legends associated with the site centers on a man whose fate is said to have been sealed by forbidden love. According to the story, he fell in love with the laird's wife, an act viewed not only as betrayal, but as a threat to honor and authority. As punishment, he was imprisoned within one of the pits beneath the castle. There he was allegedly left to starve, his cries fading as days turned into silence. Visitors have reported a lingering sense of unease near the lower areas of the ruins. Some describe a sudden heaviness in the air, while others speak of an oppressive stillness that feels markedly different from the surrounding grounds. On rare occasions, faint sounds have been heard echoing from below, though no clear source has ever been identified. Another figure said to appear at Yester Castle is known as the White Lady. She is most often associated with the castle's gateway, where witnesses describe seeing a pale female form standing motionless before vanishing without trace. Her presence is usually silent, marked only by a sudden chill or a feeling of being observed. Unlike more dramatic hauntings, reports from Yester Castle tend to be restrained. There are no accounts of violent disturbance or overt displays. Instead, the experiences described are subtle, defined by atmosphere rather than action. A sense of intrusion, a reluctance to linger too long in certain areas. Skeptics point to the power of suggestion, particularly in ruined medieval sites where darkness, shadow, and history combine easily. Wind moving through broken stone can create unsettling sounds. Uneven ground and shifting light can alter perception. These explanations are reasonable and difficult to dismiss. Yet, even those unfamiliar with the legends often remark on how Yester Castle feels different from other ruins. The site carries a weight that encourages quiet reflection rather than exploration. The past here seems close, not distant. Today, Yester Castle stands open to the elements its story preserved through stone and memory. But as daylight fades and the ruins settle into shadow, some believe that not all who entered these walls ever truly left. And as we leave Yester behind, our journey through East Lothian continues toward a grand house, where the details are fewer, but the reputation remains firmly intact. Newhailes House, just outside Musselburgh. Newhailes House stands as one of East Lothian's most elegant historic estates. Designed in the early 18th century, the house is celebrated for its symmetry, landscaped grounds, and carefully preserved interiors. At first glance, it appears a place of order and refinement, its past neatly catalogued and openly displayed. Yet despite the lack of dramatic legend, Newhailes has long carried a quiet reputation for being haunted. Unlike other locations where specific figures dominate the narrative, reports from Newhailes House are notably vague. There are no widely agreed names, no clear identities attached to the unexplained experiences. Instead, the stories focus on atmosphere and sensation elements that are often harder to dismiss or define. Visitors and staff have spoken of rooms that feel unexpectedly heavy, as though the air itself resists movement. In some areas, particularly along upper corridors and lesser-used rooms, a sudden stillness has been noted, accompanied by the uneasy sense of being observed. These feelings often arise without warning and fade just as quietly, leaving no physical trace behind. Footsteps are among the most commonly reported phenomena. They are described as slow and deliberate, moving above or behind the listener, yet never revealing a source. On occasion, doors have been found slightly ajar after being carefully closed, though no sign of forced movement has ever been identified. What unsettles many witnesses is the contrast between the house's appearance and the experiences reported within it. Newhailes is well lit, well maintained, and rarely silent. And yet moments occur when familiar spaces feel suddenly altered, as though the building has slipped briefly out of alignment with the present. Skeptics suggest that expectation plays a significant role here. Historic houses encourage reflection, and quiet interiors amplify sound and imagination alike. Changes in temperature, air pressure, and light can all influence perception, particularly in large old structures. These explanations are reasonable, and the estate does not promote any supernatural association. Yet even those unfamiliar with Newhailes' reputation often remark on its distinctive mood. There is a sense that the house remembers, even if it does not reveal what it remembers. Newhailes House remains open to the public, its history preserved with care and precision. Visitors come for architecture, art, and landscape. But beneath this polished presentation, some believe traces of earlier lives still linger, leaving impressions rather than apparitions. And as we leave Newhailes behind, our journey takes us onward to a church where a powerful figure from Scotland's political past is said to appear, bound not by grief, but by legacy itself. St. Mary's Church, Haddington. Standing quietly alongside gate in the historic town of Haddington, St. Mary's Church is one of the largest parish churches in Scotland. Its scale stonework and long association with power and faith give it a commanding presence. Yet beyond its architectural significance, the church is linked to a figure whose influence once shaped Scotland itself. The apparition most often associated with St. Mary's Church is John Maitland, the Duke of Lauderdale. A dominant political figure of the 17th century, Maitland was known for his authority, ambition, and controversial methods. His legacy remains divisive, and it is perhaps this unresolved judgment that has kept his presence rooted in local memory. According to tradition, the Duke has been seen within the chapel, his figure appearing briefly before fading into shadow. Witnesses describe a tall male form, dressed in period clothing, moving slowly and deliberately as though surveying the space rather than passing through it. He does not speak, nor does he acknowledge those who see him. His presence is said to feel stern rather than threatening. Those who encounter the figure often report a sudden change in atmosphere. The air grows still. Sound seems dampened. Some describe an instinctive urge to lower their voice or stand more respectfully despite being alone. These reactions are often explained as psychological responses to the setting, yet they recur with notable consistency. St. Mary's Church has witnessed centuries of worship, political ceremony, and social change. It has stood through periods of upheaval, reform, and conflict, absorbing the weight of history into its walls. For some, this accumulation alone is enough to account for the sensations reported within. Skeptics suggest that old churches naturally encourage projection. Light filtering through stained glass can distort shape and shadow. Echoes linger longer than expected. Memory and expectation combine easily in such spaces. These explanations are practical and widely accepted. Yet even visitors unaware of the Duke's story sometimes remark on a presence that feels attentive rather than empty. The church does not feel abandoned, even when unoccupied. There is a sense of continuity, as though the building remains conscious of its role in public life. St. Mary's Church continues to serve its community, its doors open, its purpose unchanged. Services are held, Visitors come and go, and history is carefully preserved. But for some, the past here does more than rest quietly. And as we step away from this place of authority and legacy, our journey through East Lothian continues toward an estate where a grieving figure is said to walk halls and stairways, leaving behind whispers and unanswered questions. Fasque Estate near Tranent. Hidden among wooded slopes near Tranent, the ruins of Fasque Estate, sometimes known as Yester Castle, sit quietly above the surrounding countryside. Little remains of the original structure, beyond fragments of stone and suggestion, yet the site's reputation has endured long after its walls began to crumble. The most frequently reported presence at Fasque is known as the Green Lady. According to local tradition, she was the lady of the castle during the 16th century, a period marked by political tension and domestic uncertainty. Her story is not tied to a single recorded tragedy, but rather to a lingering attachment to the house she once ruled. Witnesses describe the Green Lady as a female figure, dressed in green, seen most often within the hall, and on the staircase leading toward what was once the guest suite. Her appearance is usually brief, a figure glimpsed at the edge of vision, a shape standing still for a moment too long. When approached, she fades without sound or movement. Alongside sightings, voices have been reported within the estate. These are not loud or distinct, but low and indistinct, as though fragments of conversation carried on stale air. Those who hear them often cannot identify words, only tone, leaving behind a sense of interruption rather than communication. Visitors have also described other odd experiences: a sudden chill on the stairs, the feeling of someone close behind when no one is present, an unexplained reluctance to move further into certain areas of the ruin despite clear access. These sensations are often described as instinctive, arising without conscious thought. Skeptics point out that ruined sites lend themselves easily to such impressions. Broken stone alters sound. Trees funnel wind unpredictably. Light shifts rapidly across uneven surfaces, particularly in low visibility. Expectation, especially when stories are known, can shape perception in subtle ways. These explanations are sensible and widely accepted. Yet even those unaware of the Green Lady's legend often remark on the atmosphere at Fasque. The site feels attentive rather than abandoned. Silence seems deliberate, as though something is listening rather than absent. Fasque Estate remains largely forgotten, unmarked by signage or ceremony. It draws little attention beyond those who seek it deliberately. But for some, its quiet persistence is what makes it unsettling. The sense that a place once filled with life has not fully released it, and as we leave the remnants of Fasque behind, our journey continues toward a tower where another Green Lady is said to walk, her story simpler yet no less enduring. Preston Tower, Preston Pans. Rising above the town of Preston Pans, Preston Tower stands as a solitary reminder of Scotland's fortified past. Built in the 15th century, the tower once served as a defensive residence, its thick walls and narrow stairways designed for protection rather than comfort. Though now preserved as a historic site, its atmosphere has long inspired stories that suggest the past has not entirely loosened its grip. The ghost most commonly associated with Preston Tower is known as the Green Lady. Little detail survives regarding her identity, and this lack of clarity has only added to her enduring presence in local folklore. Witnesses describe her as a female figure dressed in green, seen moving quietly through the tower or standing briefly within its shadowed interior before fading away. Unlike more dramatic hauntings, reports from Preston Tower are restrained. The Green Lady does not speak, nor does she display overt emotion. Her appearances are fleeting, often noticed only at the edge of vision. Those who encounter her frequently question what they have seen, uncertain whether the experience was real or imagined, yet unable to dismiss the sense that something was there. In addition to sightings, visitors have reported subtle changes in atmosphere. Certain rooms feel noticeably colder even on warm days. Sounds within the tower behave oddly, with footsteps echoing longer than expected or appearing to come from above when no one else is present. These moments are brief, but they leave a lingering unease. Skeptics point to the nature of tower houses themselves. Their enclosed spaces amplify sound and trap cool air. Changes in light entering through narrow windows can easily create illusions of movement. These explanations are practical and often sufficient, particularly in an old stone structure exposed to the elements. Yet even those unfamiliar with the Green Lady's story often remark on how Preston Tower feels. There is a sense of watchfulness within its walls, as though the building itself is alert. Visitors speak of lowering their voices instinctively or feeling reluctant to linger in certain corners without knowing why. Preston Tower remains an important historical landmark, its preservation focused on education rather than mystery. Families visit, school groups explore, and the past is presented through dates and facts. But beyond this official narrative, the legend persists, quietly passed from one generation to the next. Whether the Green Lady represents a former resident, a symbol of memory, or simply the power of place, her story continues to shape how the tower is experienced. And as we leave Preston behind, our journey through East Lothian moves onward to a site where the echoes of flight and war linger in a very different form. National Museum of Flight. Set on the former East Fortune airfield, the National Museum of Flight occupies ground shaped by conflict training and long hours of vigilance. Once an active military airfield during the First and Second World Wars, the site now preserves aircraft hangars and stories of aviation history. Yet alongside these carefully curated exhibits, a smaller number of unexplained reports have quietly endured. The most frequently mentioned apparition is that of a man dressed in flying gear. He is rarely seen, and when he is, the sighting is brief. Witnesses describe a solitary male figure wearing period aviation clothing, often noticed at the edge of vision, within or near the hangars. When approached, the figure disappears without sound, leaving behind only uncertainty. Alongside these sightings, another detail recurs with notable consistency. The smell of tobacco has been detected in areas where smoking is strictly prohibited. This scent is described as sudden and localized, appearing briefly before fading with no obvious source. For those familiar with the habits of wartime pilots and ground crew, the association is difficult to ignore. The atmosphere within the hangars is often described as calm, yet attentive. Sound behaves oddly, with footsteps echoing longer than expected even in open spaces. Some visitors have reported a sense of being watched while standing alone among the aircraft, a feeling that fades once they move on. There are no reports of aggressive behavior, sudden noises, or dramatic disturbance. Instead, the experiences described are subtle and restrained, a presence felt rather than announced, a momentary overlap between past and present that leaves no lasting trace. Skeptics suggest practical explanations. Old buildings retain smells, large spaces distort sound and perspective. Expectation, particularly in places tied closely to wartime memory, can influence perception. These explanations are reasonable, and the museum does not encourage any supernatural interpretation. Yet even those unaware of the stories sometimes remark on the emotional weight of the site. The airfield carries the memory of routine tension and departure. Thousands once trained and waited here, some never to return. For some visitors, that sense of absence feels almost tangible. The National Museum of Flight remains a place of education and remembrance, its focus firmly on history rather than mystery. But when the hangars grow quiet and the airfield stretches empty beneath the sky, some believe traces of those who once served here still linger, moving silently between aircraft that no longer fly. And as we leave East Fortune behind, our journey continues toward a historic house, where sound itself is said to return not as music, but as something unfinished. Lennoxlove House, set among rolling parkland near Haddington, Lennoxlove House stands with quiet confidence, its stone walls reflecting centuries of aristocratic life. Once known as Lethington, the house has been home to powerful families, political intrigue, and cultural refinement. Yet among its many rooms, one space in particular has earned an enduring reputation that centers not on sight, but on sound. The most persistent story associated with Lennoxlove House concerns the Blue Room. Within this room sits a piano once played by the composer Frédéric Chopin during his visit to Scotland in the 19th century. According to local tradition, the instrument has been heard playing on its own, long after the house has fallen quiet. Witnesses describe hearing faint piano notes drifting through the room, usually late in the evening or during periods when the house is empty. The sounds are not recognizable melodies. Instead, they are described as scattered, uneven notes, as though someone unfamiliar with music were pressing keys at random. The effect is unsettling rather than beautiful, suggesting presence without intention. Those who hear the piano often report an immediate awareness of silence elsewhere in the house. Other sounds seem to fall away, drawing attention sharply toward the room. Some describe a sense of hesitation before entering, an instinctive pause, as though interrupting something unfinished. Unlike many haunted locations, Lennoxlove is rarely associated with apparitions or movement. There are no reports of figures walking the corridors or objects shifting position. The disturbance remains focused, contained within sound alone. This restraint has made the accounts particularly difficult to dismiss for those who experience them. Skeptics offer familiar explanations. Old pianos can respond to changes in temperature and humidity, causing strings to vibrate or shift. Historic houses settle, and sound can travel unexpectedly through long corridors and high ceilings. These explanations are reasonable and widely accepted. Yet those who hear the notes often insist the timing feels deliberate. The sound begins and ends abruptly. It does not build or fade naturally, and it is rarely heard when the house is busy, only during moments of stillness. Lennoxlove House continues to function as a private residence and heritage site, its history carefully preserved. Visitors come to admire architecture, gardens, and art. Few expect unease, but for those who linger near the Blue Room, when the house grows quiet, the memory of uneven piano notes can stay long after the sound has stopped. And as we leave Lennoxlove behind, one final location remains: a castle ruin, where legend claims the very stones were shaped with help from something not entirely human, bringing our journey through East Lothian to its darkest point. Yester Castle, hidden beneath the rolling hills near Gifford. Yester Castle is unlike any other ruin in East Lothian. Little remains of the structure above ground, yet beneath the earth lies its most infamous feature, the Goblin Ha, an underground hall carved directly into the rock. It is here that one of Scotland's oldest and strangest legends continues to linger. According to tradition, Yester Castle was once owned by Sir Hugo de Giffard in the 13th century. Legend claims that Sir Hugo was no ordinary nobleman. He was said to practice dark arts, summoning spirits and goblins to assist him in building the vast subterranean chamber that could not have been constructed by human labor alone. The Goblin Ha was believed to be raised in a single night, shaped by forces that worked unseen. Over the centuries, visitors to the site have described an overwhelming sense of unease when approaching the underground chamber. The entrance itself feels heavy and oppressive, as though the earth resists intrusion. Once inside, sound behaves strangely. Voices seem muted, while footsteps echo unpredictably, giving the impression of movement where none can be seen. Some visitors have reported hearing faint noises described as whispers or low murmurs rising briefly from the stone before falling silent. Others speak of a sudden awareness of being watched, particularly within the deepest section of the chamber. These sensations often prompt visitors to leave sooner than planned, driven by instinct rather than fear. Unlike many haunted sites, Yester Castle is rarely associated with a single apparition. There are no clear figures or recurring shapes. Instead, the haunting is tied to the place itself. The stone, the darkness, and the legend of its creation combine to create an atmosphere that feels active rather than abandoned. Skeptics argue that confined underground spaces naturally provoke discomfort. Darkness alters perception. Sound reverberates unpredictably. Knowledge of the legend influences expectation. These explanations are logical and supported by psychology. Yet even those unaware of the Goblin House story often remark on the same sensations: a pressure in the chest, a reluctance to speak, a sense that the space is listening rather than empty. Yester Castle stands open, its ruins exposed to daylight and weather. By day, it appears peaceful, even unremarkable. But beneath the ground, the Goblin House remains unchanged, its origins uncertain, its purpose unclear. And with that final descent into shadow, our journey through East Lothian comes to an end, leaving us with the enduring thought that some places are shaped not only by hands and tools, but by stories that refuse to fade. These places remind us that ghost stories often grow from history, memory, and the landscapes we inherit. Whether legend or interpretation, they invite reflection rather than certainty. Share your thoughts below and join Creepy Experience as we continue exploring Britain's haunted past.